Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to do something that might feel a little heavy at first glance, but I promise you, it is arguably one of the most important conversations we could possibly have.
It really is.
We're going to a prison cell. We're going back to Athens, 399 BC, and we're going to watch a man die.
But not just any man. We are witnessing the death of Socrates, the father of Western philosophy.
We're doing a deep dive into Plato's Phaedo. Now, if you know anything about Socrates, you probably know the bumper sticker version. He annoyed the Athenians, they put him on trial, he drank the hemlock, and he died. It's the classic story of the martyr of reason.
Right. And usually when we think of that death, whether we've seen the famous painting by Jacques-Louis David or just read the Apology, we think of it as a tragedy.
Of course.
It's the state crushing the individual. It's ignorance killing wisdom. It's a sad story.
But the text we're looking at today, it just doesn't feel like a tragedy, does it? That was the first thing that struck me.
Not at all. And that is the absolute shock of the Phaedo. This is a drama, certainly. But it's a drama that just refuses to be tragic.
Yeah.
Socrates isn't kicking and screaming. He isn't begging for mercy. In fact, he's the only person in the room who seems to be having a good time.
Which is just bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, his best friends are there, they're crying their eyes out, pulling at their clothes, and Socrates is basically telling them to pull it together.
Get a grip.
Yeah, get a grip, because he's about to go on a great vacation.
That is the central paradox we really need to unpack today. Why is he so calm? Is he delusional? Is he, arrogant? Or does he know something about the universe that we don't?
So our mission today is to try and figure that out. We're going to walk through the arguments he gives for the immortality of the soul.
And they are rigorous arguments.
Very. And we're going to see how he tries to prove to his friends, and let's be honest, maybe to himself, that death is not the end.
And we have to talk about the crisis, that moment where those arguments almost fall apart completely.
Oh, it's incredible. It's a roller coaster of logic and emotion.
It really is the definitive text on death and the soul.
Okay, so let's start with the setup. This is a dialogue written by Plato. But Plato does something very, very clever right at the beginning. The narrator isn't Socrates.
No, it's a guy named Phaedo.
Who was he?
Phaedo was a young disciple, very beloved by Socrates. And the framing of the whole dialogue is that years later, he's telling the story of that final day to a group of Pythagoreans.
Pythagoreans, so philosophers who love math and mysticism.
Exactly. And he's in a town called Phlius, just recounting the events.
So it's a recollection. It's a story within a story.
It is. And Phaedo lists the cast of characters who were there in the cell. You have Simmias and Cides, who are these really sharp intellects from Thebes.
You're the main challengers, right?
They are. Then you have Crito, Socrates' oldest and most loyal friend. You have Apollodorus, who is just an emotional wreck the entire time.
Right.
But then Phaedo drops this very curious detail. He lists everyone, and then he says, Plato, if I am not mistaken, was ill.
That is one of the most famous absences in all of literature. I mean, Plato's the author. He wrote the book. But he explicitly writes himself out of the room. Plato was ill.
It creates such a fascinating texture. By noting his own absence, Plato is creating a certain artistic distance. He is signaling to you, the reader, that this is a reconstruction.
It's on a court transcript?
Exactly. A stenographer wasn't taking down every single word. This is a dramatic work.
So he's giving himself license.
He's giving himself total license. If Plato were there, he'd be a witness, bound by the facts. By being ill, he becomes a dramatist. It allows him to blend the historical Socrates, the guy who asked annoying questions in the marketplace, with his own developing metaphysical ideas.
He's using Socrates as a vessel for what we would call high Platonism.
Precisely.
Now let's physically place ourselves in that room. We're in Athens. Socrates has been condemned for corrupting the youth and introducing false gods. Usually in Athens, execution followed sentencing almost immediately.
Yeah, sometimes by sundown on the same day.
But here we have this strange, agonizing delay. Why is he still alive?
It's a matter of cosmic bad timing. Or maybe good timing, depending on how you look at it. The day before his trial, the Athenians crowned the stern of a sacred ship to send to Delos.
This is the festival of Apollo, right? The mission to Delos.
Exactly. It commemorates the myth of Theseus. The story goes that Theseus saved Athens from the tribute to the Minotaur, the 7 youths and 7 maidens sent to Crete to be devoured.
He went, killed the beast, saved the children.
And the Athenians, being very pious, vowed to send a mission to Apollo every single year to say thank you.
So it's a religious holiday.
It is. And here is the crucial legal point. As soon as the priest crowns that ship to leave the harbor, the city of Athens enters a state of ritual purity.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning the city cannot execute anyone, it cannot be polluted by death, not until that ship sails all the way to Delos and comes all the way back.
And ancient sailing wasn't exactly a scheduled delta flight.
No, the winds were unpredictable. It took a long time. So for about 30 days, Socrates has been sitting in this cell.
Wow.
His friends have been visiting him every day, arriving at dawn, bribing the jailer to let them in early. They've basically been holding a month-long seminar on philosophy.
But today is different. The ship has been spotted.
It's docked at Sunium. The ritual purity is over. The execution is mandatory today.
So when the friends arrive, Phaedo, Credo, the others, they aren't there to just chat.
No, they're there to say goodbye. The text says they arrive, and the jailer tells them to wait because the 11, the magistrates, are freeing Socrates from his chains.
And when they finally get in, the scene is so surprisingly domestic. Xanthippe, Socrates' wife, is there. She's holding their child, and she's just crying.
She says something absolutely heartbreaking. "Oh, Socrates, this is the last time you and your friends will converse."
Oh, that's rough.
And Socrates, rather abruptly, asks Credo to have someone take her home. It seems harsh to us, but he wants to maintain a calm atmosphere. He doesn't want the emotion to drown out the reason that's about to unfold.
Once she's gone, Socrates does something so incredibly human. He doesn't launch into a sermon immediately. He rubs his leg.
He rubs his leg where the chains have been just gnawing at him for a month. He feels the blood rushing back into it, and he muses on how strange pleasure and pain are.
What's the observation he makes there?
He says they're like two distinct bodies attached to a single head. You can't have one without the other. He was in pain from the shackles a moment ago. Now that the shackles are off, he feels pleasure.
It sets up the first major theme of the entire work. Opposites. Pain and pleasure. Life and death. They're linked. You can't separate them.
But it also grounds us for all the talk of souls and spirits we're about to hear. Socrates is very much in a body right now. He feels that physical relief.
And this leads nicely into the first real philosophical tangle of the day. Sabibs, who is always the one poking holes in things, brings up a contradiction.
A great one.
Socrates has been saying that a true philosopher should be willing, even eager to die. And yet, he also says suicide is wrong.
Right. Sabibs basically asks, if death is so great, why is it unlawful to kill yourself? Why wait for the executioner? Why not just speed up the process?
It's a very logical question. If you want to leave the party, why wait for the bouncer to throw you out?
Exactly. But Socrates gives a theological answer here. He uses two analogies. First, he says, man is like a soldier in a garrison.
A guard post.
We have been placed here by the gods. We are on duty. You cannot abandon your post until the commander dismisses you.
That feels very Roman, very stoic almost. You have a duty to stay alive until you're relieved of that duty.
It does. And the second analogy is that we are the possession of the gods. He asks Sabibs, if your ox killed itself without your permission, wouldn't you be angry?
So we're the gods' cattle.
Essentially, we are property. Therefore, we have no right to destroy ourselves. We must wait for a divine summons or a necessity.
And for Socrates, the verdict of the Athenian court is that summons.
That's his out. He isn't choosing to die. He's accepting the door that has been opened for him.
Okay, so suicide is off the table.
Yeah.
But he still claims that he is happy to go. And this is where he drops the bombshell definition of what he does for a living.
It's one of the most famous lines in philosophy.
He says, true philosophers are always pursuing death and dying.
It sounds incredibly morbid to the modern ear. Philosophy is the practice of dying.
It really does. But he means it in a very technical sense. We have to define our terms. What is death for Socrates?
For him, it's simple. The separation of the soul from the body. That's it.
Okay, so then you have to ask, what does a philosopher want?
A philosopher wants wisdom, truth. They want to understand the forms, these perfect ideas of justice, beauty, goodness.
And does the body help you get those things?
Socrates would say absolutely not. The body is a massive, massive annoyance.
It's an impediment. Think about his list of grievances against the body. First, it has needs, it gets hungry, it gets thirsty, it gets cold.
It wants sex. It has lusts and passions that are constantly pulling your attention away.
Right. If you're trying to solve a complex math problem or understand the nature of justice and your stomach is growling, or you have a headache, or you're distracted by physical desire.
You're compromised. The body is constantly shouting at you, demanding attention.
And it's not just the distractions. He talks about the senses themselves being deceptive, right?
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. Socrates argues that Our sight and our hearing are not accurate. They give us a distorted view of reality.
We see things in perspective. We see optical illusions.
Exactly. To get to the truth, to what he calls real being, you have to close your eyes, you have to shut your ears, and let the mind work alone.
You have to gather the soul into herself.
Precisely. You have to isolate the intellect from the constant confusing noise of the senses.
So his logic is this. If wisdom is only possible when the soul is separate from the body, and death is that separation,
then the lover of wisdom, the philosopher, should be thrilled that the separation is finally becoming permanent.
it's like practicing for a marathon your whole life. You've been training, dieting, running every day. Why would you be afraid when the race actually starts?
It would be inconsistent. It would prove you never really loved the running in the first place.
He even compares the courage of the philosopher to the courage of normal people.
Right. He says normal people are brave because they're afraid of something else, usually shame or pain. They trade one fear for another.
They're hedging their bets.
Exactly. And they're temperate. They control their desires because they want to save their pleasure for later. It's all a commercial exchange.
But the philosopher trades everything for one thing.
Wisdom. That is the only valid currency in the Socratic marketplace. So, he argues, I have spent my life ignoring my body to find the truth. Now that the body is being taken away, I should be the happiest man in Athens.
Okay, that explains his attitude. It makes sense, internal to his logic.
Yeah.
But his friends aren't letting him off the hook that easily.
No, not at all. Socrates, again, steps up.
He's the voice of the common man here, the skeptic. He says, that's all well and good, Socrates. But most people think that when the soul leaves the body, it's not going to some realm of pure truth.
Right.
They think it's like smoke or air. It just disperses. It vanishes on the wind.
And that's the real fear, isn't it? The fear of annihilation. If the soul just blows away like smoke, then all this talk of practicing dying is a complete waste of time.
You have to prove the soul sticks around. It has to have some substance.
And this is where the Phaedo shifts from a conversation into a rigorous, formal debate. Socrates has to prove the immortality of the soul.
He offers a series of arguments. The first one is the argument from opposites, sometimes called the cyclical argument.
This goes right back to that first observation about pleasure and pain, right? Things come from their opposites.
Exactly. Socrates asks us to look at how nature generates things. He says, take the concept of something becoming larger. For an object to become larger, what must it have been previously?
Well, it must have been smaller. You can't grow if you're already at maximum size.
Right. And for something to become weaker, it must have first been stronger. For something to become worse, it must have been better.
He establishes a universal law. Opposites are generated from opposites. And between these two states, there is always a process.
The process of growing or diminishing, waking or sleeping?
Exactly. Now, he traps them. He asks, is there an opposite to living?
Yes.
Dead. And do these two opposites come from one another? Well, we know for a fact that dead comes from living. We see people die every day. That process is visible.
But Socrates argues the reverse must also be true.
Logic demands it. If nature is a closed loop cycle, then living must be generated from dead.
This is the rebirth argument. But why is that necessary? Why can't it just be a one-way street? Life turns to death, and that's the end of it. Why can't the universe just run down?
Socrates addresses that with a great thought experiment. He brings up the myth of Endymion.
Who is Endymion?
Endymion was a shepherd who was cast into an eternal sleep by the moon goddess because she loved how he looked when he was sleeping.
A little creepy, but okay.
Socrates says, imagine if the process of falling asleep existed, but the process of waking up did not.
Eventually, everyone and everything would be asleep.
The whole universe would be one snoring Endymion. If generation was a straight line, life to death, and never circled back, eventually all energy, all life would be exhausted. The universe would be a graveyard, static, dead.
So for life to exist now, there has to be a mechanism of return. It's almost like a conservation of energy argument, but for souls.
That's a perfect way to put it. He argues that souls are a constant quantity. They just cycle in and out of bodies.
Okay, so that's the conservation argument. But he layers on a second argument, which I find so fascinating because it's so uniquely Platonic. The argument from recollection.
This is the idea that learning isn't acquiring new information. It's remembering information we knew before we were born.
Recovering knowledge that was lost at birth.
Right. And he proves this with the concept of equality. This is a bit abstract, so let's walk through it slowly. Socrates says, look at two sticks or two stones. We say these are equal. But are they perfectly equal?
No, of course not. If you get a microscope or a laser measurer, there are always going to be tiny differences. They fall short of perfect equality.
Exactly. They strive to be equal, but they fail. And yet we possess the standard of absolute equality in our minds to judge them by. We look at the sticks and say, they aren't quite equal.
So we have the standard, the perfect form of equality in our heads.
But where did we get it? We have never seen absolute equality in the physical world. Everything here is flawed and changing and imperfect.
So if we didn't get it from looking at the sticks, we must have had it before we ever saw the sticks.
Precisely. Since we haven't acquired it through the senses in this life, we must have acquired this knowledge before we were born.
Which implies that our souls existed before birth in a place where they could learn about these perfect forms.
And if you combine the two arguments, the cyclical argument, which says the living come from the dead, and the recollection argument, which says we existed before birth,
you get a pretty robust picture of a soul that exists prior to the body and cycles in and out of existence.
It's a powerful 1-2 punch.
But Socrates doesn't stop there. He moves to the argument from affinity. This is about the nature of the soul itself.
Yeah, he divides all of existence into two buckets, two categories. Bucket A is the visible, the composite, the changing.
That's the body, the furniture, the rocks, the trees, anything that's made of parts and can fall apart.
Right. And bucket B.
Bucket B is the invisible, the simple, the unchanging. That's the forms, like justice and beauty, the truth, the divine.
And he asks the killer question, which bucket does the soul belong in?
Well, the soul is invisible. It rules the body. It grasps the unchanging truths. It seems pretty clear.
The soul is akin to the divine and indissoluble. The body is akin to the mortal and dissoluble.
So it is unnatural for the soul to be destroyed.
It's unnatural for something simple and divine to break apart like something composite and earthly. The divine doesn't break. And since the soul is like the divine, it shouldn't break either.
This leads to some of the most vivid imagery in the entire book. He talks about what happens to the impure soul, the soul that didn't practice philosophy.
The soul that loved the body too much. He says these souls become heavy, they become clotted with the corporeal, they can't fly away to the invisible realm because they're literally weighed down by their lusts and their love of physical things.
He actually explains ghost stories this way.
He does. He says the shadowy apparitions that people see in graveyards are these heavy, polluted souls that can't let go of the physical world. They prowl around tombs because they are trying to get back into a body.
And eventually they're reincarnated. And the choice of animal fits the vice, which is kind of funny.
It's almost comedic. The gluttons and drunkards become donkeys. The violent and unjust become wolves and hawks.
And the social, well-behaved citizens, the people who follow the rules but didn't really think deeply about virtue,
they get to be bees or ants. Social, orderly creatures. But they don't get to join the gods. Only the philosopher, the one who purified the soul through reason, gets to go to the invisible realm.
So it's a hierarchy of being based entirely on how detached you were from your physical cravings.
Indeed. And at this point in the dialogue, everyone feels pretty good. Socrates has laid out a really strong case. The soul is divine, it cycles, we remember things from before birth. Phaedo tells us the room was quiet and satisfied.
But then a silence falls.
Yeah.
And it's not a happy silence.
No. Simmias and Cebes are whispering to each other. Socrates sees them and he says, "Come on, how with it? You have objections."
And this is section 4, the crisis. I love this part because it feels so incredibly real. Socrates compares himself to a swan.
The swan song, it's such a beautiful myth. He says swans sing right before they die, not out of sadness, but out of joy, because they are birds of Apollo. They are going to their god.
And Socrates says he is a fellow servant of the swans. He's prophesying his own happy transition. So he invites the objections.
And Simmias drops a bomb, the harmony objection.
It is such a powerful argument for materialism. I have to be honest, when I first read this objection from Simmias, I actually put the book down and thought, well, he's got him.
It feels so modern. Simmias basically says, look at a harp or a lyre. You have the wood, the strings, the tension, that's the physical stuff.
Right.
And then you have the harmony, the tuning. It's invisible, it's beautiful, it's divine in a certain sense.
But it is entirely dependent on the physical instrument.
100%. If I take a sledgehammer to that harp, the wood is still there, the broken strings are still there, the physical matter remains.
But the harmony, the tuning, it's gone. It doesn't float away to a harp heaven. It just stops existing.
And Simmias applies this directly to us. He suggests the body is the instrument. a mixture of hot, cold, wet, dry elements, and the soul is just the tuning of those elements. It's a byproduct.
It's epiphenomenalism. The mind is just what the brain does. And if that's true, Socrates is completely wrong.
He is. Because when the body dies, the soul doesn't leave. It just winks out of existence. The music stops.
That is a direct hit on the idea of immortality. If the soul is just a byproduct of the body, then immortality is impossible by definition.
And then Socrates comes in with the 1-2 punch. He accepts that the soul might be stronger than the body for a moment. He uses the weaver and the coat analogy.
Right. Sabes is a bit more generous than Simmias, but his objection is just as scary.
He says, imagine a weaver who makes many coats. He wears one out, he makes another, he wears that out. He outlives many coats.
So the soul outlives many bodies. That allows for reincarnation.
Right. But eventually, the weaver gets old. And one day, he dies while wearing his last coat. Sabes argues that just because the soul is stronger than the body and lasts longer doesn't mean it's eternal. It might wear out eventually. It might perish in its final death.
And the room just collapses. Phaedo tells us that the listeners felt a profound depression. They had been lifted up by Socrates' arguments, and now Simmias and Sabes have completely popped the balloon.
They feel like maybe there is no truth to be found.
And this brings us to the most important philosophical lesson in the book, which isn't even about the soul. It's about misology.
Misology. The hatred of arguments or reason.
Socrates sees their despair. He pauses the whole debate to warn them. He says, don't blame the argument. It's like trusting a person who turns out to be bad, then trusting another who turns out to be bad. Eventually you become a misanthrope. You hate all people.
And he says the same thing happens with ideas. You believe an argument, it fails. You believe another, it fails. If you aren't careful, you start hating reason itself. You decide there is no truth, that everything is just chaos.
Socrates tells them, the fault is in us, not in the truth. We just aren't skilled enough yet. We have to keep trying.
And then in this incredibly tender moment, he plays with Phaedo's hair. It grounds the scene again. He is literally about to die, but he is comforting them about the failure of logic.
And then he rallies the troops. He dismantles the objections. How does he handle the harmony argument from Simmias?
It's a masterclass. He traps Simmias with his own beliefs. He asks, Simmias, do you believe in the theory of recollection, that the soul existed before birth? And Simmias says, yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. Because a harmony cannot exist before the instrument is built.
Exactly. You can't tune a lyre that hasn't been built yet. So the harmony theory directly contradicts the recollection theory. Simmias has to choose, and he chooses recollection, so the harmony theory is out.
He also points out that a lyre can be more or less in tune, right? A harmony has degrees.
But a soul can't be more or less a soul. You are either a person or you aren't. There's no dimmer switch on personhood.
And the kicker.
The soul rules the body. It says no to thirst, no to hunger, no to passions. A harmony can't tell the strings what to do. It is created by the strings. It follows. It doesn't lead.
So the soul is a ruler, not a dependent resonance.
Goodbye, harmony argument. It's completely destroyed.
Now, what about Sabes and the Weaver? This one seemed much harder to refute.
It is harder. It requires Socrates to give a history of his own intellectual development. He talks about how when he was young, he was interested in natural science and Anaxagoras and the mechanic causes of things.
The how versus the why.
Precisely. He says the scientist would explain that Socrates is sitting in prison because his bones and sinews are arranged in a certain way, but that's absurd.
That's the mechanism, not the reason.
Right. He is sitting in prison because he chose to accept his sentence, because he judged it was best to obey the law. The bones are just the necessary condition, not the ultimate cause.
So he moves to a more sophisticated explanation involving the forms.
He talks about the exclusion of opposites. This is the final logical stand. He says some things are necessary carriers of certain forms. Fire is a carrier of heat. Snow is a carrier of cold. 3 is a carrier of oddness.
Fire cannot admit cold. If you bring cold near fire, the fire must either retreat or perish. It can't become cold fire.
Exactly. Now, what does the soul carry? What is its essential property? The soul brings life to the body. That is its definition. It is the animator.
So if the soul is the carrier of life, it cannot admit the opposite of life, which is death.
Right. Just as the number 3 cannot become even, the soul cannot become dead. Therefore, the soul is deathless.
But wait, the snow melts when heat comes. Why doesn't the soul just perish when death comes, even if it can't become dead?
Because Socrates makes a final, crucial distinction. He argues that the deathless is, by its very definition, imperishable. If something cannot admit death, it cannot be destroyed by it. When death attacks the man, the mortal part, the body dies, but the immortal soul, the part that refuses death, retires. It withdraws intact.
The weaver doesn't die in the last coat. The weaver simply steps out of the coat and walks away.
That is the ultimate conclusion of the argument. The soul is immortal and imperishable.
Having settled the logic, at least to the satisfaction of everyone in the room, Socrates shifts gears completely. He stops arguing and starts painting a picture, the myth of the afterlife.
This is Plato the poet taking over from Plato the logician. Socrates says we don't know what the earth really looks like. We live in the hollows, the low spots filled with mist and water and thick air.
He says we're like fish swimming at the bottom of the ocean, looking up at the water's surface and thinking that is the sky.
I love that image. He says if we could just pop our heads up above the atmosphere into what he calls the ether, we would see the true earth.
And what's it like?
It is spectacular. The colors are brighter, purer. The stones are rubies and emeralds and jaspers, not just dirty rocks. The people there live longer, they have no disease, and they talk directly to the gods. It is a vision of a hyper-reality.
But then he goes down, he describes the underworld. And this is a very specific, almost scientific geography. The earth is bored through with tunnels.
And there's a great chasm called Tartarus. All the rivers of the underworld flow into and out of it like a giant pulsating lung.
He names the rivers. You have Oceanus, the outer circle, Acteron, the river of the dead, Pyriphlegethon, the river of fire, and Cocytus, the river of wailing.
The hydraulics of hell, essentially. And he details the judgment that takes place. The average people, he says, go to Acheron for a while to get purified. The incurable criminals, tyrants, serial murderers get thrown into Tartarus forever.
But there's a fascinating middle group, the curable sinners, people who committed crimes of passion but then repented.
Their fate is terrifying, but also hopeful. They're thrown into Tartarus for a year. Then the waves of the river wash them out to the edge of the Acherusian lake, and they have to scream and beg their victims for forgiveness.
And if the victims agree?
They get out. If not, it's back into the fire for another year. It's a system of restorative justice, metaphysical style.
And the philosophers, the ones who lived the good life.
They are released from the earth entirely. They get to go live in the true earth above, without bodies, in pure contemplation.
Socrates finishes this incredible story, and then he says something very humble. He says, look, I'm not saying this is exactly how it works, but it's something like the truth. It's a noble risk to believe it.
A noble risk. That is such a beautiful phrase. He's admitting that reason can only take you so far. At the edge of death, you need a myth, a story to carry you across.
And now the sun is setting. The narrative catches up to the present moment in the cell. Socrates goes to bathe.
He says he wants to save the women the trouble of washing a corpse. It's so practical, so thoughtful even then.
And Crito, dear Crito, is still fussing over him. He asks the most heartbreakingly practical question, how shall we bury you?
And Socrates laughs. He actually laughs. He says, you can bury me if you can catch me.
It's the ultimate mic drop moment. Or I guess, hemlock drop. He's telling Crito, you still don't get it after all this time. I am not this body. I am the thing that is about to leave. The body is just the shell.
The jailer comes in to tell him it's time, and even the jailer is crying. He calls Socrates the noblest and gentlest man he's ever had in his prison.
Then the poison arrives. The hemlock. Crito tries to stall one last time. He says, the sun is still on the mountains. Other people wait until late at night. They eat, they drink.
But Socrates refuses. He says he won't be ridiculous in his own eyes by clinging to the dregs of life when it's time to go.
He takes the cup. He asks if he can pour a libation to the gods, but is told there's only enough poison for the death dose. So he just prays for a safe journey.
And he drinks it cheerfully, no hesitation, no fear, and that is when the dam breaks for his friends. They all just dissolve into tears. Apollodorus starts howling.
And Socrates scolds them. Gently, but he scolds them. What is this strange outcry? I sent the women away for this very reason. A man should die in peace.
He walks around to get the poison into his system. His legs get heavy. He lies down. The numbness spreads. From his feet to his legs, up to his waist. The cold is creeping up to his heart.
And then the final words. He uncovers his face and speaks to Crito. Crito, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt?
This has puzzled people for centuries. Asclepius is the god of healing. You sacrifice a rooster to him when you recover from an illness.
So Socrates is saying, death is the cure.
Exactly. He is viewing life in the body with all its confusion and pain and illusion as the sickness. Death is the recovery. He is finally being healed.
Crito says it will be done, and then he closes Socrates' eyes and mouth, and Phaedo delivers that final, simple eulogy. the wisest and justest and best.
It is an incredibly powerful end, and it changed the world. This text shifted the center of gravity in Western thought. Before this, immortality was a shadowy, ghostly thing. You think of the Homeric shades flitting about in the underworld.
Right. Not very appealing.
Not at all. Plato made the soul, the real person, the intellect, the divine spark, the thing that truly matters.
It sets up the dualism that just completely dominates Western history. Body versus soul, flesh versus spirit. You see it flow right into Christian theology.
Absolutely. The separation of the world of sense, which is seen as fallen and confusing, and the world of spirit, which is pure and eternal. It's all right there in the Phaedo. St. Augustine, Dante, and they were walking on the road Plato paved here.
And even today, we're still fighting the battle between Simmias and Socrates in a different form.
We are. Is consciousness a harmony of the brain, the neuroscience materialist view, or is it something else? Is it a driver in the seat?
That is the enduring question. If Simmias is right, then when the brain dies, we are gone. If Socrates is right, the brain is just the receiver for a signal that exists independently of it.
Which brings us perfectly to our thought experiments.
Always my favorite part.
Mine too.
Okay, scenario 1, the AI harmony. Let's apply Simmias' objection to the future. Imagine we build a super intelligent AI. It has a personality, memories, maybe even what it calls feelings. It claims to be conscious.
Okay, I'm with you.
Is its consciousness a harmony of the code and the hardware? If I smash the server with a sledgehammer, if I break the lyre, does the AI's mind just vanish?
Simmias would say yes, absolutely. The hardware, the physical arrangement of silicon, created the consciousness. No hardware, no mind. End of story.
But a Socrates of the digital age might argue that the code, the algorithm, the pattern, is the form. It exists mathematically whether the server is running or not.
So if I upload that code to a news server,
Reincarnation, the soul of the AI returns.
that implies the soul is the software, totally independent of the silicon it's running on. It's a perfect modern update of the debate. Is the mind of the machine, or is it the ghost in the machine?
Exactly. Okay, scenario 2, the fish in the sea. Let's go back to Socrates' true earth myth. He says we are fish looking up at the water, thinking it's the sky.
Right, we're in the mucky depths.
What if that is literally true about our physics? We talk about dark matter and dark energy making up 95% of the universe, but we can't see it or touch it.
So we are the heavy, sluggish creatures stuck in the hollows of visible matter.
Exactly. What if dark matter is the true earth? What if we are trapped in 3 spatial dimensions, but the real world has 4 or 5 or 10?
And what we perceive as the laws of physics are just the distorted effects of that higher reality seen through the water of our limited perception.
Right. If we could, as Socrates says, pop our heads out of our dimensional limitation, would we see a universe of true colors and true light that makes our entire galaxy look like a mud puddle?
It suggests that our fundamental laws of physics might just be the local bylaws of the mist we live in, not the constitution of reality itself.
A comforting or perhaps terrifying thought.
It is.
Disclaimer. As always, these are outlandish speculations for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please don't try to drink hemlock to test the dimensions of the universe.
Just don't. The Phaedo is a model for how to face the unknown with courage and reason, not a user manual for exit strategies.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the cell of Socrates.
It was a pleasure.
This has been Talk Treatises. Keep thinking.